Okay. Thank you all for your patience. So today we're having another program in a series we've had for some time on human rights in North Korea. By way of background, the UN General Assembly is set to vote on a resolution later this week on the human rights situation in North Korea. And perhaps we can talk about that a little in the Q&A session. So we welcome you today to today's program with Mr. Kim Hyung-Soo and David Hawk. Please join us also on January 12th, where we have another program on human rights in North Korea, or the lack of. It's called the Invitation Only Zone, about Japanese abductees by North Korea. And also on February 18th, we'll have a discussion with the Republic of Korea Ambassador for Human Rights, Jong-un, on issues raised by the UN Commission of Inquiry report, the DPRK responses, and also other developments in the United Nations concerning the human rights situation in North Korea. Mr. Kim Hyung-Soo is a North Korean defector. He's a former researcher at the Long Life Health Institute, Mansumugang Institute, I'm not sure what it's called in Korean, from 1990 to 1994, in charge of conducting extensive scientific research to maintain, back then, Kim Jong-il's health. He was subsequently a supervisor at the Workers' Party of Korea from 1994 to 1995, but was imprisoned at the Pyongyang Hyung-Jaesan area for re-education. He defected to South Korea in 2009 and has since served as the Unification Education Board member in Gyeonggi Province in, of course, South Korea. He has actively promoted North Korean human rights on social and mainstream media. David Hawk is a senior advisor for the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. He has engaged in the documentation and analysis of worst-case violations in the human rights investigation system, human rights provisions in conflict resolution, non-governmental human rights advocacy, human rights organization and agency management, and human rights education and training. He is recognized as a leading expert on human rights in a number of countries, in addition to North Korea, Cambodia. And we've been fortunate to have David Hawk moderate a number of programs here at the Korea Society. Last but not least, our interpreter, Ms. Jean Lee. She was president of Princeton for North Korean Human Rights and currently works at the New York University School of Law. So, thank you all. I should mention, I believe we have evaluation forms for this program. This is something we've started a couple of months ago. And so please fill them out before you leave. And also, we thank all the members who have rejoined us today. And for those who aren't members, perhaps first-time visitors too, we'd like you to consider joining the Korea Society to help us support programs like today's. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Kim, it's an honor for me to meet you and to have the ability to talk to you briefly today. I would like to ask you a few questions about your personal experience and then a few questions about the situation in North Korea. If we were meeting in Seoul, we could talk about this for hours and hours, but we'll try to be very short so that we can have time for the members of the audience to ask you questions. And so my first question about your personal experience is that I'm aware that you were imprisoned for several years in a prison camp known in Korea Korean as Kyohwaso. And could you say a little bit about the circumstances, why you were imprisoned, and if you had any kind of trial or legal procedure before you were locked up in the prison camp?
제 소개는 안 해도 되는 건가요? 제 소개를? 예. 예. 우선 영어로 잠깐 해볼까요? There is a place on earth where people live without understanding the concept of human rights. That place is a large prison called North Korea. Both my mother and I were tortured, and my mother passed away in her prison cell after a police caught her on her way to China. And my name is Hyung-Soo. I'm escaped 6 years ago. I'm working toward a graded degree in Seoul. 교화설에 영어로 하지 말고 우리말로 하지 힘들었어요.
So I think that many people are aware of the political prison camps in North Korea, but by Gyowaso, this is for what they call economic prisoners. But I was locked up in a specialized Gyowaso. So when international organizations come into North Korea to tour around Gyowaso, there is the model one on display in Pyongyang.
제가 권한행군 시기라고 하는 90년대 중반 그때 김일성이 죽고 나서 그 연구소에서 나와가지고
So there is a company that imports certain international goods, and this is practically serving the purpose of getting foreign currency for the benefit of Kim Jong-il. And he was accused when this company was not making enough money.
소매 장사도 하는 거죠. 왜냐하면 도매 가격으로 뽑아서 소매로 팔기도 하고 그런 가정 안에 김정은이가 자기한테 들어오는 돈이 안 들어온다고 해가지고 그 회사를 통째로 이제 없애치워 버렸어요.
At the time, used Japanese TVs were very popular in North Korea, and my son-in-law was involved in importing such TVs and reselling. And when I was brother-in-law. When he was having a meal in a restaurant, he was approached by another person. So after about a month, my brother-in-law disappeared, and I didn't know any aspect of the detailed conversation that my brother-in-law and another end of that transaction was having. However, I was somehow accused. So it seems that just because I was present in the conversation, the brother-in-law might have implicated him for being involved in the transaction. So in North Korea, there is a concept of lawyers. However, I didn't even know until I escaped to South Korea what the real role of lawyer is. I didn't know that lawyers exist for defendants. So the company that Mr. Kim was mentioning earlier was actually forced to close down because of the foreign currency issue and the missing money issue. And as part of the process, 21 people have been executed.
구조장에서 제가 잘못이 없다 나는 막 주장을 했죠. 그런데 중요한 건 뭐냐면
So I was in a prison cell for 4 months and I was beaten and was subject to all sorts of violence and was a very painful process.
너무도 고통스럽고 힘들었었고요. 한 거의 넉 달을 고생하면서 그 안에서 있었는데
So I was, towards the end of the detainment process, I was approached and was told that a lawyer will see me and that there will be a trial soon. When the lawyer showed up to talk to me, he told me that actually, if he confessed on all the crimes that he was being accused of by the prosecutor, it will be an easier way out. And perhaps if he agrees to that, he might be subject to lesser punishment, such as just being subject to re-education through labor instead of being sent to a prison for however many years.
결과적으로 제가 교화소를 가게 됐었는데
So I didn't even realize that the lawyer's job was to speak on my behalf as a counsel. I perceived the lawyer as a secondary prosecutor who was there to basically further accuse me.
한마디로 말하면 변호사는 저는 지금 생각하는 게 북한에서는 제2의 검사다 이렇게 지금 제가 생각하고 있죠.
So I was first sent to a general 교화소 prison in Cheongsan, and then I was transferred to the specialized model 교화소 in Pyongyang after 3 months.
두 가지 교화소를 제가 다녀요.
The technical legal language for that is arbitrary detention and denial of due process or fair trial rights. But let me ask you another question. After you were released from the prison, you remained in North Korea for several years, but then decided to flee to China and South Korea. Can you tell us just a little bit about the reasons that you chose to defect?
네.
I am from a hometown city called Haesan, which is a city on the border between China and North Korea. After having worked in Pyongyang for many years, I visited my hometown in a really long time. So on my way back to my hometown, I ran into 3 corpses. 2 were little kids and 1 was adult. I was so shocked by the fact that all the passersby didn't care about the corpses. I was shocked by the apathy of the other people. So I asked my old friend, because I wasn't back in my hometown in a while, having worked in Pyongyang for many, many years. And I asked why people don't care about these corpses and why they just leave them around. And my friend told me that it's been like this. There was a huge famine and dying people all the time for the past 3 years. And that if your family member dies and the rest of the family members die, then there's nobody else to be in charge and address the corpses. So they just leave them around. So when I was having the conversation with my old friend told me, this must be a shocking reality to you because the famine situation is probably non-existent or not as severe in Pyongyang where you worked. So I kept on going and was asking about what's going on in my home city. And my old friend told me that, actually on the other side of the border in South Korea, this type of situation doesn't happen at all. And Mr. Kim was curious how the friend knows about the situation in South Korea. So he asked him, and the friend told him that he has a couple of friends who are Korean Chinese called Joseon, ethnic minority group in China, and that those people actually are able to go to South Korea to have a higher income and tell some old friends back in North Korea about some stories about what's going on in South Korea. I was led by my old friend to visit the city hall of Haesan, and I saw trucks. I saw many, many trucks that are designated to basically dump all the corpses that are not claimed by anyone. So he filled me in about the story about what was happening in the past 3 years in Haesan outside of Pyongyang, and how 6 people out of the 42 middle school classmates all died in that famine. My friend was also smuggling some items from other countries, and through that I was able to get a radio and have access to other media, including Voice of America. And through that, I got to get slowly exposed to the outside world, and that really was the key incident in making me determined to escape North Korea. So one time, when there was a huge rain in Amrok River, a river that's also on the border between China and North Korea, in 1 hour, he observed 42 corpses drifting away in the river. Out of the, 7 corpses. And out of the 7 people, 6 were women and 1 was a man. So the situation was that during the famine, there was a huge flow of North Korean people wanting to escape North Korea. So there was a directive from Kim Jong-il saying that anybody who attempts to escape can be just shot down to death instantly. So that's why I saw so many corpses in that river bordering between North Korea and China. Through these experiences and observations, I became a really big fan of all the media that I could get access to through radio. And through that, I slowly began to realize the propaganda of North Korea was all lies, and that North Korea was a system with so many contradictions that do not respect the dignity, the basic dignity of its own people. In 2009, when I was attempting to escape North Korea through a broker, I was using a cell phone. But instantly, I was approached by 3 police officers, public security police officers, who basically caught me. And I was subject to torture and really severe investigation. But after all, I succeeded in escaping. And I noticed that the police officers were holding a cell phone detector to catch people like me.
Thank you for that information about your own personal experiences. Let me switch gears a little bit and ask you about the reaction of the North Korean government on the one hand and the people in North Korea on the other hand over the very big concerns that are expressed nowadays at the United Nations about the human rights violations in North Korea. For the last 2 years, the other governments around the world, by overwhelming margins, have condemned the human rights violations in North Korea as crimes against humanity and recommended to the Security Council that the UN refer North Korea to the International Criminal Court. I'd like to ask you about the response of the North Korean authorities to the global criticism of its human rights situation. And so first about the response of the government that you can see, I guess, in KCNA or Nodun Shinbun, the response of the government to the international criticism, and then secondly, the response of the people in North Korea. Are they aware about this?
Yes. Even before I defected to South Korea, I heard about this discussion, international discussion about North Korean human rights situation and the UN pressure. However, most people are not aware of the concept of human rights. There's no access to internet in North Korea, and therefore there's very limited knowledge that general people have regarding the international movement. However, some people do try very hard to keep up with what's going on outside of North Korea in terms of the international trend. by listening to radio. However, it's a very dangerous act because you can be just shot for listening to those channels on radio. In 2004, I was listening to one radio channel and heard about the adoption of the Act on North Korean human rights, and I was interpreting that perhaps with this international support, even if I get caught in China through my journey to escape into South Korea, maybe I will have some support system in making my journey. But I do think that recently, with all the international pressure, and especially a very obvious one, like the discussion of bringing Kim Jong-un to the International Criminal Court, I think that the North Korean authorities are very sensitive to this type of international and global discussion. In South Korea, I volunteered to assist with recent North Korean defectors who go through resettlement training program in Hanawan in Seoul upon their arrival, just as a volunteer activity. And I heard some recent trends, some stories about the recent escapees, about what's going on in North Korea. And I heard a rumor that, yes, Kim Jong-un made a directive to tell the prosecutors or the police officers that if they use violence and torture, that they will face consequences. So I was puzzled. I wasn't sure about the validity of this rumor. Maybe it was just a rumor, but I think it's a testament to the fact that the North Korean authorities seem to recognize the level of international pressure, especially the charges about crimes against humanity and the discussion of International Criminal Court. So I think that the North Korean authorities are aware and are responding and are sensitive.
I also heard stories about the directive that you mentioned, which may mean that the international pressure is working a little bit, but we really don't know very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Kim, for coming, and thank you, David, for the moderating, and thank you for the interpreting, Ms. Lee. And thank you all for coming.